Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of The Serene View. I'm Serene, your host, and with me today is a special guest, Anjli, who will be sharing with us some leadership lessons from Silicon Valley. Now, before we start, Anjli is a chief risk officer, global chief risk officer. And I actually ask her what she does because, a chief marketing officer does marketing, a chief IT officer does IT. So does a chief risk officer create more risk? Does the risk for the company? Well, we'll leave it to Anjli to tell us. So Anjli, would you like to introduce a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Serene. Really great to be in your program. Thank you for inviting me. And I love the name, by the way. I will take that head on. Obviously, risk exists in all walks of life, in your personal life, in business. And so, you are probably the chief risk officer of your life, managing all the risks and decisions every day, whether you're in your car deciding to push on the pedal and get through that orange light before it turns red, or decisions you're making in business. So a chief risk officer, helps manage, the risk in the business that you're in. So hopefully that helps. Very good morning to all the folks in the Americas. Good afternoon to folks in Europe and Africa, and good evening to those in Asia and Australia. As Serene said, I am Anjli Dudani, and I'll give you sort of a quick whistle-stop tour of my work life, which essentially started with a computer science degree from India. And I naturally started in the tech sector. So thanks to all my awesome managers who opened a number of doors for me after getting my MBA from Boston, I applied my skills to practice risk management in the financial services sector. I've had the privilege of working for a number of companies in financial services and the tech industries over the last 30 years. And I have worked from, large companies like GE, which at one point was the largest company in the world in its heyday. I worked for both public and private companies. Some of the names that you will recognize are JP Morgan Chase, Royal Bank of Scotland, Barclays, eBay, Intuit, and most recently Vanguard. As Serene mentioned, I spent a bit of time in Silicon Valley, so naturally I could not grow old without trying my hand at startups. Unfortunately, those aren't very big names today, but I probably learned more from those experiences and made some of the strongest friendships, even though we didn't hit the jackpot with our startups. So that's from me, Serene. I don't know if you want me to get into.
I was gonna let you talk more about it now, but no problem. We talked a little bit, and it's like I give you a little of a background how we ended up on this topic. Because obviously for me, Silicon Valley is something that I've heard about, and it's brought spawned tons of great companies, and I always thought leaders there should be doing quite well. And then Ashley is like, let me tell you the truth behind that. And I was like, Ashley, you are on. I'm bringing you on my show and tell us the truth, right? Tell us the truth about leadership in Silicon Valley. And so I think maybe one of the things you could start with sharing is just a little bit in general about what is it like in Silicon Valley. I mean, what is it like in general for those of us who have never been there in our lives, and what is leadership like in particular?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a little bit about me in Silicon Valley. I've worked in Silicon Valley twice in my career. The first iteration was my early career. I moved clear across the country from North Carolina, where I had recommended the closure of the factoring business that GE Capital had purchased, all the way to a little startup called Aceva in Mountain View, California. While it was an exhilarating experience to be designing and building, our product with engineers and selling the concept, which at that point was really vaporware, to large financial institutions like GE and Wells, the sad truth of it is we burnt out of cash and had to sell our portfolio and let a lot of people go. So it was painful. It's not always a success story, as you can imagine. I think you've heard the statistic, 9 out of 10 startups fail. Sadly, at that point, my husband had also made the move to join a startup. And as luck would have it, his company also folded the same week. So with a big mortgage and bills to pay, we learned our personal risk management lesson that one of us needed to work for a large, stable company. So it's not all, roses sitting in Silicon Valley. Everything doesn't always, succeed. And so at that point, I, of course, dusted my, strong GE resume and went back to big banking. And, I swore to return. So after a 13-year stint with, various large organizations, I returned to Silicon Valley to be chief risk officer of eBay, followed by, Intuit. I also advised a couple of startups and did a startup called Velo Payments. I learned a ton and started to advise people who wanted to make the shift to Silicon Valley from, traditional banks, because that's kind of what I knew well was, what the culture is like in banking. And as Serene said, she and I started talking, and I wanted to share some of my observations, which are mostly related to the culture in Silicon Valley. I will say that the 4 things that I was excited about returning to Silicon Valley were data, technology, innovation, and speed. And I was very surprised about what I learned when I got there in 2014. So quickly, Serene, if you're okay, I will name my top 4 takeaway teasers, and then we can deep dive into each of them based on, where you all want to take the conversation. So the first one was go slow to go fast. The second one was technology is not your biggest asset. And then the third one was fake it till you make it. And the last one I'll call fail fast. So Serene, as you monitor the chats, I'll be guided by you on where you want me to start and where you want me to go deeper.
Sure. I think perhaps the first thing that we can talk a little bit about is because you've been in traditional banks, and I think you've been even across the channel in UK, and you've been in Silicon Valley, right? So is there even any difference in the leadership styles? I mean, obviously from organization to organization, there's quite a lot of difference, perhaps also in culture. But is there anything in particular that is unique about the culture or the leadership of Silicon Valley as opposed to anywhere else?
So the big surprise for me, because everyone thinks about Silicon Valley, at least pre-COVID, as, you can work remotely because you work for a tech company. And the big surprise for me was the face-to-face nature of the interactions that were expected of leaders. Leaders were expected to spend a lot of their time getting to know their people and staying close to their people, and being, highly present. I came from big global banks where, people all over the world, and to be efficient, you wrote an email, you sent, a quick text, or you made a phone call if you really needed to have a conversation. And, at times, this is all, pre 2014, before I arrived back in Silicon Valley, you might do a video if that, but the expectation that you built trust by being face to face took me by surprise. My old boss, the CEO of Intuit, told all of us that we should audit our diary and figure out how we're spending our time. And he declared to us that he spent 40% of his time getting to know the employees and where their hearts and minds were. And he asked that we should aim to do the same or better. I looked at my diary, which was filled with meetings to get work done, and had to reprioritize my day to make room for the most important asset, which is really our people. and get to know what was on their minds and how to, win their hearts. So that's kind of, actually, you went to what I had number 2, which is technology is not your biggest asset. It's people, right? And the preference for pressing flesh and having face-to-face interactions, looking people, eyeball to eyeball, really was a big difference to me. And I kind of helped some of my friends who came from big banks to say, listen, if you want this big global job, you have to move to Silicon Valley. You can't live in London. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm used to running a global organization. I should be able to do that. I said, you should, but the only way to do it is to actually show up and be here in person. All of this was obviously, pre-COVID, and thanks to COVID, the paradigm has changed.
Actually, I will be interested to find out from those of you who are on the call with us. I mean, those of you who are listening to this, what is your opinion of Silicon Valley? I mean, what do you think of Silicon Valley? I don't know if you've been there. Share with us what is your experience like. If you have not been there, just share with us what your impression is like. And does it come to you as a surprise? Because actually, it did come to me as a surprise. I would have thought, of all people, they would be able to do. Okay, this is a very antique term, but it used to be called telecommuting. I'm not sure if you remember, if I'm from a different era, but it used to be called telecommuting. Now it's called work from home, but of all people, I would expect them to do it most. But tell us, what is your opinion of Silicon Valley, or what is your experience if you've been there? Share with us a little bit more about this, the fact that technology is not your biggest asset. I think that is very ironic, given that Silicon Valley. I mean, what do you compete on? Isn't it tech?
That's a really great point. That's what I thought too. When I came to Silicon Valley, I thought, wow, I'm going to have access to the best technology, and this is, the mecca for people who want to invent stuff. And very quickly realized that, it's people that are your differentiator. With the shift to everything as a service, it makes starting a new business and disrupting really easy. And, you have to recognize that it's the people that come up with the ideas. It's the people that, as Serene's putting out there, that are the differentiator for your company. And Silicon Valley companies work really, really hard to retain their people. If you will look at resumes from Silicon Valley, you will see that people move around very quickly. So, companies will try to grab you with, not just more money, but better benefits, giving you more opportunity and career track. I mean, it's very, very competitive. And so holding on to your people, because they can become your competitors very fast. It's very easy compared to, 10 or 15 years ago, when you needed a lot of capital to start something. Now it's asset light type of business. You can rent services, hire developers, designers, even get other companies to do your payroll and benefits. And so you can do all of these things as a service, and gig workers, cost a fraction of the price of trying to do it yourself.
Is that one of the challenges? Because Adeline is written in to ask, what are the key leadership challenges of startups at Silicon Valley? Is people one of the biggest challenges?
It is. So as you can imagine, you can hire a lot of smart people, but that doesn't make a team. It's about pulling those people together to collaborate, to build on each other's ideas, to be able to produce something for your customer that drives value for your customer, that creates a great experience for your customer. So people is one of the biggest challenges in Silicon Valley. It is everywhere, I think, to attract the best people, but they are the differentiator, to be honest.
I'm tempted to say that the challenge is not the same everywhere. And why do I say that? Because if I compare, and not that you say it this way, it makes a lot of sense to me. Because if I think about, for example, the benefits offered by Google, right? Your laundry gets taken, you have the best food, you have, umpteen number of benefits and perks versus a typical large company here in Singapore, which offers none of those, right? But quite obviously, they're still getting workers. So I think if you look at it in reverse, the very fact that Google or all of those IT companies had to give that in order to get people must speak to people being like a way bigger challenge there. And actually, to Adeline's point, right? I'm wondering if you are a startup, does that make the whole problem worse? Because I know you started your own startup as well, right? Does it make the whole thing worse? Because obviously, who are you to fight with Google in terms of benefits, right? In terms of perks?
The way to compete as a startup is the promise of success, right? So if you're part of Google, you are one of thousands of people, and you are, a cog in the wheel. Whereas if you're a startup, and obviously it's not for everybody, you take a lot of risk. Being part of a startup, it could fail, which 9 out of 10 Silicon Valley companies or startups fail. The risk is really high, especially I think I told you the story of how when I, first came to Silicon Valley, both my husband and I, our companies folded and we had big bills to pay. So there's a lot of risk involved, but the reward is high, right? So you get to bring your ideas to bear. You get to work with people that you trust and can have fun with. You get to obviously, if it does succeed and goes IPO, et cetera, your ship comes home and there's, a lot of money in the bank. But the fun of working at a startup or the environment in a startup is very different from a large company. So it attracts a very different kind of person in a different stage in their life. You're either early on in your career where you don't have a lot of bills to pay, you don't have kids to send to school, you don't have to worry about all those things, or later on in your career where you've achieved all of that, you've paid off your mortgage and you don't have a lot of bills, your kids have already finished college, they're not on your payroll anymore. So it's a very, different set of people that want to go start their own company and take that risk.
Is that because she did ask about challenges. So I'm just wondering, are people the main thing? Do you have other leadership challenges that you face in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I would say people is the number one. I would say, being a risk officer, I definitely want to, touch on one of the things that I found to be, challenging. As you can imagine, entrepreneurs love to innovate. And I think the phrase "fake it till you make it" is an infamous term now, I think, thanks to Elizabeth Holmes. But it epitomizes Silicon Valley. There's a history of, selling vaporware and building the MVP, the minimum viable product, on the fly. And so while this, may fly in some instances when it comes to regulated industries, because that's kind of where I've focused my life on is, financial services and fintech. You have to understand the risks of building that MVP. You have to understand, what is required by the regulators. You have to hire expertise and know the regulations and the requirements to help navigate the disruptive technology that you're building. Otherwise, you could have a lot of fines. You could go to jail. And I've seen it because innovators just want to break all the rules and disrupt and create new things. And so I would say, that's definitely a challenge, is to learn from the mistakes you make and not get into hot water. A lot of times, because entrepreneurs are optimistic, even when they've had issues, they want to believe it's a black swan event. It's not going to happen again to them. And they don't learn from it. So I would say that's another leadership challenge.
So I was wondering whether is the lesson not to fake it till you make it, or actually to fake it till you make it? Because I was like, should we or should we not? What do you think?
It's a double-edged sword. So that's a great point, Serene. Nothing in life is black or white, right? So if you're a startup and you have this great idea, or even if you're a large company and you have a great idea to innovate, you have to have the vision, which is the fake it part, right? To say it's here, even though it's not here, and to build around it to create that MVP to understand what will fly. However, when it's taken to the extreme, in the case of Elizabeth Holmes, and you flaunt all the regulations and things that you must keep in mind, it can bite you, right? So you have to kind of walk that balancing act to say what is okay to fake and what is not okay to fake.
And actually, I would be interested to hear from those of you who are on the call with us. Do you fake it till you make it? I mean, do you step into situations? And this is very interesting conversation because I think it was 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with another lady, and we were talking about the exact opposite, which is the imposter syndrome, where women are perfectly qualified but feel that they are imposters. And yet now we're talking about, should we fake it till we make it? Do you fake it till we make it? And Anu says that yes, she also thinks that perception is greater than reality. And so perception holds more truth. And actually, Anu, I agree with you. I've been known to say that there's no reality. There is only that perception of reality, our view, our slice of reality. And so, when we talk about this faking it till we make it, right? At what point, at what point have we made it? At what point are we faking it? At what point do we still suffer from imposter syndrome when we are still when we have made it, right? And I think that is a really interesting conversation. And I think coming from Silicon Valley, which is the land of promise the world and deliver all your bugs as features. What advice would you give to other leaders in terms of being able to walk on this knife edge and not fall over?
So I would say it's really, really important to understand the boundaries of things, right? So as Anu said, and as you've said, it's really important to project your vision and bring people along on your vision, to be able to actually help people think of how they're going to disrupt and create that new capability or technology. It's really important, because otherwise you're going to be sort of stuck in the land of status quo. So very important leadership trait. And this is probably why the chief risk officer position exists, because you have to think about the other side of faking it, right? How do you make sure that you're not overselling, misselling, especially when you have regulations and legal liabilities, etc. So to understand those boundaries and say, you know what, I'll give you an example. I have focused on financial services, and one area that I focused on is the payments area. And there are a lot of regulations related to payments, as you can imagine, because you want to make sure that there is trust in the payment network. And therefore, there's a list of things that you must comply with and get a license, etc. And many times when startups came to me and said, it's really expensive to build a risk and compliance department. Do we really have to do this? And do we have to get a license? Can't we just do what Hyperwallet did or so-and-so did? They just got a small fine. And back in the day, if you were a little company, you were flying under the radar. And maybe now too, if you're a small company, you might fly under the radar. But when you grow up, the regulators will come looking, because you will have complaints, you will have issues if you haven't built the right capability. And then the fines will come and people will go to jail, because it is getting to become a criminal offense if you just thumb your nose at, things that are, clear rules and clear violations of, consumer protection laws, etc. So it's very important for you to understand. And how you understand that is by hiring experts, right? So you have to get people that actually understand the boundaries and try to figure out how do you use those boundaries to help define or redefine what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to disrupt, you're trying to, make changes to customer experience. There is a way to do things, and people have done them. But the idea is to actually understand that before you go breaking all those rules.
I think this is a very interesting question at this point because it sounds to me as though you are bringing the big organization compliance and risk management to small startups, right? But Adrian's question is just the opposite, which is what have you learned from startups that would help? I mean, what are you doing differently now in a large organization? Have you moved from the startup back to a large organization?
That's a great question. And the reason why I actually was hired by some of the larger companies in areas that I didn't have background in. So, for example, Vanguard hired me. It's an investment management firm. Yes, it's banking to most people, but I'd never done that before. They were attracted to me because of my startup experience and working in Silicon Valley, being able to put the customer first, being able to move at pace with what the customer is expecting and focusing on the customer experience pieces of it. As you can imagine, risk management and following rules, et cetera, can slow things down. But how do you do that in a startup? How do you do that in Silicon Valley where, you've got to move quickly and be responsive to the customer is what I have brought, personally to the larger organizations is how do you apply agile thinking to risk management? How do you not take the waterfall approach and go, from start to finish on all the things that can go wrong, but actually create that MVP with the minimum bells and whistles and be able to turn quickly, right? So if you do see the risk going up, so if you put your assumptions down and say, these are the things that we believe could go wrong, but the probability is low or the impact is low, then let's kind of fly with it, knowing eyes wide open that we're going to take that risk. And so it's about being able to identify the things that you care about or that you worry about and being able to say, I'm going to be able to manage it today in this way, or I'm going to actually roll the dice and see what happens and be ready to deal with it when it happens.
Well, I'm not sure if this actually goes against your first lesson, which is to go slow to go fast. Because now it sounds as though you have been brought into large organizations to make them go faster. So, tell us more about this go slow to go fast? Because we're talking all about speed, right? Different speeds. What is it about?
So that's a great point. So I first heard this phrase when I got to Silicon Valley, and to be honest, it didn't compute for me as well. I thought speed was a fundamental tenet in Silicon Valley. In fact, that speed is what attracted me to Silicon Valley. I came from a 350-year-old bank. I came from Barclays to eBay, and I wanted to be able to, move fast. I had spent too much time being shackled by tech debt in old banks. And to be honest, the first thing I was surprised by in Silicon Valley was that tech debt existed there too. And it obviously, slowed us down from solving important customer problems in Silicon Valley as well. But more surprising
Can I interrupt you to express the depth of my shock at that statement? But yes, please go on. I just wanted to interrupt you to go. You are kidding me. Okay.
I actually stood up in my first 90 days in front of my whole team in eBay, and I said, guys, they asked me, what surprised you the most? Is it the fact that you can't find parking in the parking lot or something? I'm like, that you have tech debt. Like, this is shocking to me. But as you can imagine, at that time, I think eBay was 20 years old, and whatever they had 20 years when they started, to 20 years later, the speed of tech changing, the tech debt existed. And every time we thought of new projects, we had to pay the price of tech debt and updating ourselves. But more surprising was that going from 0 to 60 took a long time and a lot of effort. But accelerating from 60 to 90 was a lot easier and smoother because people were already along for the ride. And so in it was that little secret. So when you're trying to solve problems, if it's a new problem, you have to be patient. You have to make sure that everybody, first of all, aligns on the problem that you're solving. And then people need to agree that that problem needs solving and the resources that need to solve it. And then, of course, you have to come up with your options and agree with solution, all of those things. But it takes time to do all of that. So I'll give you an example. I was hired to solve the problem of rising losses at eBay. Back then in 2014, losses were like $165 million a year. And even though I knew how to do it, I had to spend a lot of time and energy educating senior executives and bringing them along in the journey. And remember, this was an important problem. And the solutions that I was offering were not novel in the world of financial services. This is what banks do all day long. In fact, PayPal, which was in eBay's backyard, did that all day long, right? So it wasn't like I was coming up with some fancy way of doing this or putting a man on Pluto. I was using, the concepts of building models to predict bad outcomes. But this was new to eBay. eBay had never done that before. And I could not just go in and solve the problem. I had to literally plant seeds, teach everybody 101 practically every day, and then water those seeds with a lot of people. Like I had to circle the wagons, as they call it in Silicon Valley, walk from building to building, talk to the important people that I needed to garner support from to solve the problem. And then once I could do some experiments and show them that building models was not voodoo, that you could actually predict good from bad, then I could zip down the highway with my solution. But the 0 to 60 took a long time. And I will be honest, I'm not a patient human being. So it took a lot out of me and a lot of people coaching me to say, it's okay, slow down, we'll get there. And I had to rinse and repeat the same lesson when I got to Intuit. And even though Intuit and eBay had common board members and they had hired me because they had seen what I could do at eBay, my CFO there, now he's the CFO at Twitter, Ned Siegel, took me aside and specifically told me that. He said, go slow, Anjli, go slow. We'll get there, but you got to give people the patience to understand, what you're proposing to do and build that, build from that. So I would say once you bring people along on the journey, you build trust and then you can go fast. But to build trust, you have to go slow.
I think that's fair. That's probably for every single business encounter. Once you build trust, you can do it fast. But before you build trust, it's like pulling teeth. And actually, I would be interested to hear from those of you who are on the call with us, right? I mean, do you prefer to move fast? Do you prefer to move slow? I'm talking to a chief risk officer who wants to go fast and has no patience. So I'm willing to take any answers, right? I'm totally willing to talk to a IT startup founder who wants to go slow, but really tell us about it. I mean, do you find that your organization is going too fast, too slow? Do you think it's better to go slower, better to go faster? Let us know, right? And the last lesson that you've shared with us, right, which is to fail fast. Now that is another speed thing, right? Not only do you have to go fast, but you have to fail fast. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard, because there have been a lot of studies. I think Harvard Business School has put one out there that says, 9 out of 10 attempts to innovate end up as failures. So obviously it reasons that the bolder the idea to innovate, the greater the risk of failure. And really, failure is defined as an outcome that does not meet the benefits that you are anticipating or what you've agreed on before launch. So the trick really is to fail fast, right? To define what success looks like and to experiment and basically see if it's going to work. Put your MVP together, see if it's going to work. So you can learn from the failure. That's the idea, is you fail fast so you can learn and you can iterate fast. the other side of that coin is to focus on your core competencies, right? As you know, engineers love to build and can probably make something better than what exists today because of the rate of change of technology. But if it's not core to your product set, then you're not going to continue to maintain that product. And it'll be very expensive to, do that. And you should actually consider, who's great at doing whatever it is that you're looking to do and buy those products instead of trying to build everything yourself. So I would say, it's on the other side of the coin. One is obviously focus on your core competency and, buy things that you can buy off the shelf from other folks. But if you are going to build it, you want to build it in a way that is iterative. So you want to learn from failure and actually celebrate failures, that people know, okay, trying this, we've not done well at it, and now we need to try something different, and people can learn from that.
I will venture to say that both of them seem counterintuitive to me, right? Okay, so firstly, I think we've all heard it, right? Innovation, creativity needs you to fail fast. We talked about design thinking, iterative thinking, and so forth, right? Arguably even agile. But I am hard pressed to think of any company who has built their organization on failure. So a lot of it is we want to succeed, we want to win at the market, we want to increase our sales, increase our market share, increase our top line, bottom line, you name it. So a lot of that is built around success. A lot of it is built around success. And I think perhaps fail fast is half the equation, right? So fail fast, but learn is the other half. Because what's the point of failing, right? So that's the first thing I was going to say. And the other one about your core competency, which actually also kind of surprised me, especially about Silicon Valley, is because Google was famous for giving a day to their engineers to build whatever that they wanted. And there came all these interesting things like Gmail, for example, which was quite obviously not Google's core competency at the point when they were a search engine. And the only reason Google ended up being the, shall we say, the next closest thing to Skynet right now is because they had all these engineers who built, Google Maps and Google Gmail and Google Earth and all kinds of interesting non-core competency products that eventually they ended up monetizing as well. So, both of them sounds quite, I don't know, controversial. I'm not sure whether it's controversial, but just more like, that wasn't what I heard on the news.
That's you are pointing out some real interesting facts, right? So you're exactly right. You fail fast for a purpose, right? Which is to learn and iterate and succeed. And what we see is the external sort of facade almost of success. But what we don't see is all the complexity to achieve success. We don't see all of the failures that exist because people don't like to shine a light on that. But it is important to learn from failure, to your point, so that you can succeed. You can see what doesn't work quickly so that you can work towards fixing those things that didn't work. So you're exactly right about that. And you're also right in observing that, hey, Google and other companies, when I was at GE, they have a lot of adjacencies. But if you're a startup, if you are a company that is trying to be successful at one thing and you get distracted by all these other things that you could be doing, then you're not going to be great at the one thing that you started out doing. And therefore, it's really important to focus on those core things. And of course, it doesn't hurt to start to think about adjacencies and give people the time to innovate and do other things. But the time it takes to actually go from, the idea to delivering on this new thing, this adjacencies, you don't want to take that time away from your core competency. So you could set people aside. You could set, as we used to call them, like the garage when I was in in Barclays, we actually set a whole team in a different building to go off and innovate on this product that we thought was going to be a great adjacency for our customers. And you go off and innovate. So how you innovate and how you set that time aside is going to be important. Make sure it doesn't take away from the core that you're building.
I think that's fair, right? I mean, if you don't even have one core competency, I think at the time when Google started this, like 1 day a week, you can do whatever that you want, they already had the search engine, and the search engine was down pat, right? So I think, before you start to look at what other things can we do, maybe we should find the one core competency first. Tiffany has a very interesting comment. She says, we hear that patience is a virtue, yet in practice, she finds this to be the most challenging. Me too. And I think Anjli just said that she's not the most patient either. So being bored, taking time out to focus on the big rocks, sitting with uncertainty. Do you have any practical guidance on how to maneuver the day-to-day kind of conflicts of life where you need to be patient, but you're just not getting there, right? So like what you said earlier on about the 0 to 60 and feeling really like, let's get on with it.
So I had a few things that really helped me, and I don't know if this will resonate with folks on the call or not. So one is surround yourself with people who are better at things than you are, right? So if you're not a patient human being, which I'm not, I surrounded myself with people who were patient. And I went to them for guidance to say, I'm dealing with this, what do I do? And some of them were older than I was. And they were like, look, I've seen this before. You just got to put the problem down. You just got to give it space. Don't rush into it, etc. And it was the hardest advice to take. But you need to hear it. And so you need the perspective of people that are better than you are. And you have to know yourself, right? You have to do a lot of self-reflection. So one of the things I'm not great at is celebrating. I love to get stuff done, achieve that milestone, deliver the thing, and then I don't even blink. I go to the next thing because, that's exciting, not stopping and saying, yay, we did this or whatever. But I know celebration is important. And so I made sure that there was somebody on my team that loved celebrating, that was great at it. And I said to that person, I was like, you're going to make sure to stop us and celebrate and organize all the things that it takes to celebrate because I'm not good at it. And so really, really important to know that you're not going to be great at everything. And so identify the things that you're great at and you love doing and make sure you put your passion into that. But then make sure that you know the things that you're not great at and, you build a well-rounded team because you're going to need that. You're going to need people that cover your flat sides.
I wonder. I honestly wonder, right? I mean, I get the point of outsourcing and each of us covering different things, but I honestly wonder whether patience is something you can delegate, right? Or patience is something that you can outsource. Because I mean, if I had a team, right, and I'm the lead. And here am I going like, let's get on with it. And all my team members goes, let's be patient and let's take it slow. I was like, no, you go to Ashley's team, right? Like I'm transferring you out tomorrow. I don't know. I mean, I seriously don't know if patience is something that we can outsource. What do you think? Have you had any success in outsourcing it?
I have to say I've had reasonable success in outsourcing it. I've not mastered patience, and therefore it's work in progress for me. And so when I see myself, like the trigger points happening for me, I make sure that like I said, check in. I've got an executive coach. I've got, coaches in my personal life as well that I go to. And it's the hardest thing for me to say is stop, go check in with various people that are in the room to say, what do you think? And that was actually a lesson I learned in Silicon Valley is you've got to kind of look around the room and see who can help you with the thing that you're struggling with, right? And there are many people you can ask the same question of, but they can't always give you the answer. They don't always know the information or have the answer. So it's very important for you to surround yourself with people that can give you advice. So if you are the one in front of the board, make sure you've got somebody in the back of the room who's watching you, who's seeing how what you're doing is sitting with people and can help sort of course correct either in the moment or afterwards, so that you can actually say to yourself, okay, the price of being impatient was X, and now I need to make sure I don't pay that price twice.
So I think in that sense, it's getting a check. What do you say? Getting a reality check, going, because what coaches mostly are is a sounding board, right? Like going, hey, am I moving at the right speed? Am I being too impatient? Is this something that I should, cut back on? And also, like what you said, somebody else who can, take a pulse of the room and go like, hey, this part, maybe go a little bit slower. This part, that's fine. You can go ahead. So I agree with you. And I think having those, shall we say, partners in crime are very important for patients as it is for most other things. So, we are coming down to about the top of the hour. I just want to see if people have any questions. I know some of you are waiting for this like magical Q&A hour to open. Actually, you could have sent in your questions at any point in time. But yes, it's officially Q&A hour. Send us your questions, send us your comments, send us your objections. If you want to object to something, send it in to us. And if I want to kind of like get you to think a little bit about what we've discussed, right, Anjli? If you want to generalize these things, do you think that these are lessons that anybody, any leader around the world will be able to apply? Or do you think that they are more applicable if we choose to move to or choose to work with Silicon Valley?
So in my personal opinion, when you asked me to come be a part of your program, I thought of the things that I learned at Silicon Valley that obviously were, surprising to me, but also I think are very applicable to when I've left Silicon Valley, because I'm not there anymore. And interestingly enough, the go slow to go fast, I heard at Vanguard as well. So when I was interviewing at that time, John James, who was the head of HR, and now he heads up the institutional business, he gave me that advice too. He said, go slow to go fast. I'm like, I've heard that one before, but I've heard it in Silicon Valley, and I'm hearing it here as well. And I think you acknowledged as well that is something that people must do, which is to go slow to, build trust, and then you can go fast, right? Once people understand the problem, trust you, they can align on things, then you can actually increase the speed. The 60 to 90 becomes a lot easier. And then I would say the people are your biggest asset, which technology is not your biggest asset, is very true. Especially in this day and age where, it's so easy to disrupt. It's so easy to take the people to go somewhere else. You have to love your people, and you have to make sure that you understand what's on their heart and mind to be able to, really get the best out of people. I would say the fake it till you make it is an important balancing act that I think people are really working on, whether you're an innovator in Silicon Valley or if you're trying to disrupt something in a large company. You've got to follow those principles of how do you balance out what you're faking, and what are the boundaries of what you're working within to make sure that you don't get into jail, that you keep yourself out of jail. And then the last one that we just talked about, which, like you said, is controversial, but it's important to experiment and innovate, but it's also important to do that quickly so that you can fail fast and learn from it. So I felt like these lessons were applicable to anyone, whether you're in Silicon Valley or not.
And actually, I will be interested to hear from those of you who are on the call with us. Which of these lessons do you find to be most useful, right? Go slow to go fast. Tech is not your biggest asset. People are. Fake it till you make it, but mind the boundary between your vision and risk, and fail fast, but fail fast for a purpose. What do you think is, your most useful lesson? From Tiffany, she says, are there any other takeaways from Silicon Valley that you feel applies universally? And what are the biggest myths that you see there?
That's a great question, Tiffany. I would say there's probably a lot of lessons. I tried to sort of summarize and come up with the few that I thought were good to talk about today. And then I think I mentioned the biggest myth about technology, right? That I was shocked that there was tech debt in a 20-year-old company. The other topic that I think has been probably circulating, I don't know if we have time to get into it today, Serene, is the whole topic of superhero leaders, which I think is a good one for us to talk either today or another time. You tell me, Serene.
I'm happy to talk with you about it today. I was just typing that tech debt is real in Silicon Valley. Okay, you can hear the sound of my shock, because there are so many companies I work for where there is a tech debt, and I'm like, oh, if only I could work for a tech company, right? I will never tech debt. But yes, I'll be happy to talk about that. But before that, so the energy has said, is the nature of politics different in Silicon Valley? Are relationships more important than capabilities? What do you think?
I was actually very surprised. So great question. I was very surprised about relationships being more important than capabilities. That is exactly what I found. And I started life as a computer science person. I think I mentioned that to you. And so for me, it's about solving the problem. It's about the answer is 27. And I learned, quickly that relationships are more important. But coming to Silicon Valley and finding out that who you know and where you've been being more important than the answer is 27, that was a bit of a shocker. But I don't think that's any different than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that would be a shocker to me too, because I think, so I'm from Asia, obviously, and here relationships are more important than any of your capabilities, and who you know is more important than what you know. But I always thought that, in the one place, right, where computer runs everything, and computers make all the decision. Apparently, AI is now hiring people at greater accuracy than humans are. That it won't be as important. So I am surprised to say that.
So
Yeah,
can I just share something on that?
sure.
Think about it. You're right, in that Silicon Valley has very high IQ people. You probably have a density of IQ people per square foot over there. And so if you have a lot of high IQ people, then the differentiator is your relationship, right? It's which high IQ person that you're going to bring in versus that, right? You have to be able to sort of discern. And so it comes back down to relationships and trust, right? You're going to bring the person that you have chemistry with, that is going to get the thing done, that's reliable, et cetera, et cetera. And so it boils down to, your relationships and who that's going to open that door for you, rather than I've got a great IQ, because everybody else has it too. Everybody else has been to Stanford or Berkeley or whichever other school. So
Yeah.
that unfortunately turns out to be the differentiator is you've worked with them before, them, their child, or their uncle or whatever.
I mean, fair enough. I think the argument over here is always this, which is the part we talked about, trust, right? And that is, if I bring on somebody I trust, then I can get up to speed with the work quickly. But if I don't, then I have to spend all that time and effort building it back up, and therefore it will be way slower. Now, to go back to Tiffany's question and your comment about superhero leadership, I think Silicon Valley is the place where superhero leaders were. I won't say that they were created, because obviously Henry Ford was around, or Carnegie Dale Carnegie was around a long time ago, but they are the place. It is the place where there was an explosion of them, and they are constantly celebrated. Everybody from Steve Jobs to Jeff Bezos, to even Bill Gates, right? I mean, now he's old, but Bill Gates and all these people. This is where superheroes leaders were celebrated. I mean, what is your opinion on superhero leaders? I mean, do you think they're helpful, they're harmful, they exist, they don't exist? I mean, what is your opinion?
So like everything else, there's probably pluses and minuses, right? So yes, superhero leaders exist, and yes, people look up to them, and it has worked for a very, very long time. But if you actually step back and think about the definition of leadership, right? For me, I was kind of reading up about this topic after you and I discussed it the other day. And this is something that, has been thought about for a long time. So it's not new. And I'll probably quote Mary Parker Follett. And she wrote this back in like 1924. And she wrote, leadership is not defined by the exercise of power, but by the capacity to increase the sense of power amongst those led. So the most essential work of the leader is to create more leaders, right? And I think we've come to a point, and this is a topic of discussion in the last few years, where people are noticing that we're in a knowledge-based environment, right? Where complex problem solving is required, and it depends less on the heroic acts of one or two individuals at the top, but more on collaboration and coordination across the organization of lots and lots of people. And so let me illustrate this with an example. If you have watched the movie Ocean's 11, it's a heist team. It's a lot of fun, but to crack the vault, you need a mastermind. You need a smooth talker. You need a contortionist. You need a safe cracker, a getaway driver, and probably 6 other specialists. I don't remember all the characters in the movie, but each of them must be a master at their craft. And success depends on every single one of those people stepping up at the right moment and executing flawlessly, right? So yeah, of course, there's a mastermind that puts the team together, has the vision of the heist, and sometimes calls the shots. And you may call that person the boss if you must. But the fact is, he or she isn't, what we discussed before, the best at many of the tasks necessary to get the job done. So the trick is in having a great vision, putting the right people together, making sure they have good chemistry together, and stepping back and letting those people take on, and maybe even stepping back to observe and assist when necessary so that everybody can do their best and shine. And I think, more and more organizations are sort of thinking about that shared leadership model.
Tiffany, it's a really good question. I mean, quite obviously you don't believe in this, superhero only, and neither do I. And actually, many people don't. But why do you feel that this superhero myth persists anyway? Is it because we are no longer used as a global society to experiencing uncertainty, and therefore, or perhaps actually, I think it's the other way around, right? That we are facing so much uncertainty that we do want. I mean, we want someone to come and save us. We want someone to say, okay, this is the way, we are going to solve this problem, and let's go.
I think it comes down to definitely what you said about uncertainty and also human nature, right? So normally you're a problem solver. You solve the problems at your home. You take responsibility for all the things. But somehow, in my observation, when you come to work, you sort of almost relegate all those responsibilities to your leader, to your employer. They are responsible for making sure you have medical benefits. They're responsible for making sure, the workplace is safe, all those things. You're used to saying, you know what, I'm good at this thing, so I'm going to focus on this thing. It's back to focusing on your core competencies, because this other thing, to be great at everything, is not possible. So I think it comes back to, what it is that you can rightfully focus on and do well, and can you then delegate upwards to your manager or to your leader, and can you let them sort of take on the big responsibility, which is a lot, and it's difficult for any one person to be responsible for everything.
And I think I'm not sure. I think we do like the idea. Certainly, I think I like the idea of a person, kind of solving the issue. I mean, just look at COVID, right? Whether it is done well, it is done poorly, it's always the leader of the country that is either praised or vilified. And to be very frank, a lot of the things that are being done are probably not even in his immediate decision. Okay. So, I mean, over here, the highest leader is the prime minister. I'm sure he's kept informed of what's happening. But at the same time, I'm equally sure that 90% of the actual decisions that are made by somebody else. He just has this overview of, okay, this is kind of where we are going. Okay, you guys decide, right? And yet, what is our tendency? If something goes wrong, is this leader, is not doing well. I mean, look at this country. The COVID is going up. Look at this country, it's going down. And across the world, we see this, right? So I agree with you. I think it's human tendency. It's almost human need, right, to have an actual face that we can blame. Because if I'm going to say that it is the Singapore government or the Singapore civil service that is at fault, it's such a nebulous concept, right? Who am I going to blame, right? So, but if I have an actual face or actual person, that makes it easier.
And you
So
can throw
I don't
darts
know.
at that person's face if you don't like them, or
yes, I mean, right? So I think that you are right to say that it's human tendency, and I'm not sure whether that is helpful for us right now going into, as you say, a knowledge economy, more and more complexity in life, to continue to hold on this, or whether we should start to fight our human nature. Okay, so for those of you who are with us, if you have any last comments or questions, please throw it in. Let us know if you have any comments or questions. And for Anjli, what is the one last thing that you want to leave our viewers or our listeners with?
Wow, I wasn't prepared for that question, I will say.
Oh no, final words of wisdom. All right, I'll give you a moment. I'll let Tiffany say first. Right. So Tiffany says, "Thank you, Anjli, for showing up, for sharing your thoughts on Silicon Valley and the superhero myth today." And she hopes that we can co-create better days ahead, brighter days ahead. So yes, thank you very much, Tiffany. From myself, actually, I must say that today has been very enlightening. I learned two things today. The first thing I learned is Silicon Valley has tech debt, and that is the most shocking thing. And I will be sure to tell all my friends and family about it. That's the first thing. Then the second equally shocking thing is that in Silicon Valley, relationships matter just as much. And I think in a lot of places, relationship dealing is vilified as, it's not meritocracy, you are, cronyism, nepotism, and so on. But I think around the world, that's how people actually operate. People don't operate purely on a AI system of dots and checks, and what is your IQ, what is your EQ, what is your established capability on this, that, or something else. But it's really, do I trust you as a person? Do I trust? And that do I trust will be all of that 0 and 60 that you're talking about, to get to speed to actually start doing the work. Yeah. So I mean, don't feel pressurized. If you have something that you want to say in some, just tell us. If not, that's fine too. No worries about it.
I thank you for that time to kind of reflect. I would say the one thing that I'm super grateful for is all of the wonderful people and experiences I've had. So I would say, one piece of wisdom or, thing that I would share is to open yourself up to experiences and people. You'll be surprised by how much the universe will conspire to help you if you open yourself up to opportunities and experiences. And I'm super grateful for that.
And Sajid has also shared with us his last comment, which is that relationships make us what we are. And I agree. I think, in a way, relationships, as what Anjli has said earlier on, right? If you surround yourself with the right type of people, you can almost kind of have this. I shudder to say superhuman, but it has this like meta human space where they can help you to do the stuff that we can't do, and they can help us to be the people we can't be. Like, be more patient for a start. Yes, be more patient. Yes.
And if I can actually piggyback off that last point that you made, that was also very surprising to me, because when I started out young, I was all about like tech and solving problems, is that people actually want to help. Like, it makes you feel good when you help someone. And so do ask for help. It is something that not only makes you better because you got the help, but actually makes the person who's giving also better. And so I would say it was probably the most eye-opening thing when people were helping me. I couldn't understand why they were helping me. And it's really rewarding, to help. And now I'm in a position to help people, and I really enjoy it.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anjli. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing all of your wonderful insight. I know this has been a really busy time for you, and I appreciate you taking your time out nonetheless and being here on the show. To all of you who are with us today, thank you so much. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your comments. I hope you benefited from this as well. Next week, we are going to talk about the exact opposite, right? So I just launched a new initiative called Dysfunctional Women. We have a page, we have a group, and the whole idea is that it's all right not to have it all together. It's all right not to have aced this thing called life, and it's all right to be, unvarnished and unwashed, and just be ourselves. And perhaps we can all help each other to get through it. So exactly what you said, right? That people will help, and I think it's a group that I would hope that people can turn up and be dysfunctional and be all right. So that's next week we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But thank you so much, Anjli. Thanks for your time today, and we'll see you next week, people. Bye bye.
Thank you, Serene. Thanks for all the questions.